Welcome back. I decided to implement isValidIdentifier because I know if I don't do it now, I won't want to do it later. So let's take care of this now. So if it's guard self not empty, return false. So in other words, if it's empty, it's not a valid identifier. That means, so let's just say the string must be non-empty. Okay, great. So that was condition 4, which should have been condition number 1. So non-empty. The next thing I'd like to check is that it starts with a letter or an underscore. So we could say let first character equal to the first character of self. So self.first. And actually, I'd like to step back a moment and look again. So first is an optional character. Okay, it's an optional character. Why is it optional? Because maybe a first character does not exist. But we just check that a first character does exist. So I am going to force unwrap, although I practically never do this. Okay? Now, let's suppose the first character is not a letter, right? I put the exclamation mark, in other words, not, and first character is not an underscore, then we messed up, right? Because we said it needs to be a letter or an underscore, So return false in this case. Okay? That's checking starting with a letter. And now the remaining characters must satisfy this condition. Okay? The remaining characters can be letters, digits, or underscores. Okay. And I'm going to pacify the compiler. Let's say return false for now, just to keep it quiet, but we'll have to change this. Or actually, let's say return true. Excuse me, return true. Okay, so let's define valid characters to be self.all satisfy. So all characters that satisfy a certain condition. And what is the condition? To be a letter, a number, or an underscore. Okay, so all satisfy. And I can get rid of this over here and just use the $0 notation. So $0 that is letter, or $0 that is number, or $0 equals to an underscore. Okay, and I'll put that on one line. If valid characters. So we want all of our characters to be valid, right? And notice that valid characters is a Boolean value. So if it's not valid, then return false. So if not valid, then return false. And we're good to go, okay? And then if we made it to here, if we survived, then we're okay. Notice that I could change this code and say return valid characters. Okay, that could also be an approach because we know the first character is fine, so the only thing left to do is check, the remaining characters. Okay? We could also combine this condition, right? We could say, if first character is a letter and first core is, or an underscore, together with this, then return that value. Anyways, there's more than one way to write this. I think this way is clear. We're just trying to survive every condition. So what were our conditions? To have a non-empty string, start with a letter or an underscore. The remaining characters can be a letter, a digit, or an underscore. And if we survived each case, then it's a valid identifier. So we could say We made it. Self, right? Because we're referring to its string extension is a valid identifier. And of course, we could test this out. Great. So we have is valid identifier. And if we go back to the code view, we were wise enough to use is valid identifier. So it will test. It will test. Okay. So let's try to give this an invalid identifier. So if I scroll down, let's see. The string name is wind, which should be valid. So let's go back up there. Let's scroll back up. So if name is a valid identifier, use my mesh view. Okay? So my logic was incorrect. Right? So it's always good to test things. Okay? So if it's a valid identifier, now we see in the preview that I have wind view because it's a valid identifier. Now, if I change wind to something else, invalid, then we'll have an issue, right? So let's go to the preview. Let's start with an underscore. That should be valid. And it is valid. We get an underscore. Underscore 2. It's fine. If you look at the preview, it's fine. Let's start with a number 3. It became my mesh view because our identifiers cannot begin with 3. Okay, or a dollar sign. Again, back to my mesh view. Now let's say wind percent. Okay, it's my mesh view again because wind percent is not a valid identifier. Okay, wind underscore. Okay, we understand what is a valid identifier. So it really looks okay. So that's really nice. That's really nice. Let's try the empty string. And we get my mesh view again, right? My mesh view is what we're going to be using if the identifier is invalid. So I'm happy we took care of this because it was a bad idea to, postpone this. It's better not to skip things. In any case, the fact that we created the extension was a good idea, okay? Even if we only implemented it, checking if the string is non-empty. Okay, great. So have an amazing day and see you next time.